Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ben Brown. I'm a partner in a consulting firm called Placemakers. We operate all over North America. No projects in Asheville, so I'm free to speak freely. I'm here to do two things. One is to introduce the plenary speaker, Bruce Tolar, but also to issue a big thank you to one of the key sponsors behind this event. I've worked all over the country, and I've never run into a group like the Land to Sky Realty Association here, who takes such an active role in promoting and sponsoring activities that have to do with the ambitions we all have about affordable housing. And so that organization needs all the support that we can give it. And I want a special thanks to the Affordable Housing Committee of the Land to Sky Association of Realtors. And is Christina Hoffman and Laura Taylor here? Christina, Laura, stand up, please. They work on the affordable housing continually. I'm sure all your questions about financing and supporting affordable housing can be answered by these two. Bruce Tolar is an architect out of Mississippi. I met Bruce back in 2005 when we were together on a big planning project in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina in Mississippi and Louisiana. Bruce was part of 100 experts that were brought into a big charrette from around the world after the hurricane in October, after the August hurricane, in order to plan some of the rebuilding and recovery efforts of Hurricane Katrina in Mississippi, which was devastated. Something like 30,000 housing units were utterly destroyed during that hurricane. Bruce was a stranger to a lot of us because he had been working on the Gulf Coast for quite a while, and all these people who came from all over the country and some from all over the world were not as familiar with Bruce. But Bruce became the sort of litmus test for a lot of people working on that charrette because he was a local guy, and he had been displaced by the hurricane himself. He was living in a trailer not unlike the FEMA trailer at the time, and so he showed up at our sessions pretty grumpy. And so the Andre Stuani, who was leading this big charrette, would, at the end of every day with a team, he would say, "How is the big guy feeling about things that are going on?" So he was the litmus test for a lot of things that we were doing during that charrette. Bruce embraced the idea, working on the architecture team there, of an idea of a Katrina cottage that could be used initially as emergency housing for people recovering from the storm, and then could be transplanted to permanent housing in real neighborhoods, or to make a neighborhood of Katrina cottages. When everybody else left, Bruce dedicated his career to starting and scaling up this Katrina cottage neighborhoods. He was the developer of a neighborhood in Ocean Springs, his hometown in Mississippi, and then that spread throughout the entire country. Now after a mere 13 years of working on these ideas, now he is considered a major innovator of cottage clusters, and has joined with a group called the Incremental Development Alliance to spread the word for this, to do workshops around the country to show how people can do small-scale developments, and how contractors, builders, realtors, local finance people can become developers themselves and add to the housing product in a local community. So with that, I give you Bruce Tolar.
Well, good afternoon. I'm glad to be back in Nashville. Thank y'all for inviting me. And welcome to be back. I love this community. How couldn't you? I'm fortunate enough to have known Ben all these years, and he's chosen to move to Asheville, and so now I have a place to crash here when I come to visit, and it's in a great neighborhood, and all the good things. I tell him he's living the dream that we've all espoused for years. In a way, I'm kind of living the dream, and I'll get into that as we get into the slides that we talk about, but Ben gave a little bit of the background of why I'm here, and basically I always kind of assess it to, like, I was sitting next to the table that the architects were designing, and we'll get to these slides in a minute, the cottages. I just happened to pick it up because I was local and saw that it was something that I could actually achieve. And I'm here today because of that, and it's only because I think I'm the only one stupid enough to not let go of it. Everybody else kind of went their way. So, you can be a dog and catch the car. You don't really know what to do with it, but it'll get you somewhere down the road someday. It's a good time to be talking to people such as you. I would say Ben started putting me on a circuit of talking, probably started here in Asheville at the Green Summit at the college here. What was that, 2007, 2008? And at that point, that conversation, when I was showing my slides, got into, all of a sudden we realized in that 2005 when we were doing cottages, we weren't really planning on green. No one was talking green or energy efficiency. We just were doing things that we thought were the right ways to do it, based on what we had seen after the storm and what we'd already were learning working in coastal towns. I come up here, and next thing I know, I'm like the middle of the green movement, and didn't know I was getting there. So now I think I'm in the middle of the affordable housing movement, and didn't know I was getting there. So let's get on, and I'll try to show you some pretty pictures, hopefully. Well, you've heard missing middle. How many in here have heard missing middle before? A few. We really didn't know it was missing until I think about the time of the recession and coming out of the recession. We knew from working in our coastal communities that we really needed the housing. We had shortages, as Ben said, of any housing, but affordable housing for sure. And the type of buildings that are suited for this are not your multi-story apartments or your, because we really didn't have those either where I live. And it's not your, single-family housing. Even though a lot of that got wiped away, we still had a lot of single-family housing. But cottage clusters, cottage courts was kind of what I hung my hat on, just because it was the appropriate setting for the units we were designing. But you can see the different range from duplex to triplex, the courts, townhouses, multiplex, and live works. In architectural terms, those had been like a species that had been pushed to the side, and no one was even interested in building. I knew as an architect in my practice, no one walked up and said, "Bruce, I need you to design me a duplex." I might be designing them a 5,000 square foot house or a multifamily, condominium or an apartment complex, but never anything in that range. And so we just didn't see it coming. But once we started working on the cottage neighborhoods, we knew we'd kind of hit on something, because it was cute. As my partner John Anderson gets upset about it, he says everybody loves them. They're so darn cute. But again, the missing middle can range anywhere from a pop-up tent, for commercial usage, all the way up to a 3-story multifamily building. Oh, I was going to ask, since we're talking, there's a great example of it. Somebody brought up in one of the sessions this morning, just a while ago, the lady in yellow, that they were allowing for duplexes to be qualified as, if you could build a single family, move to duplexes. Well, here's probably a 4-plex. Looks like a single family residence. Those have always been in our neighborhoods, and especially in urban places, not so much rural. And I know there's a lack of, in the conversations we're having, the need for housing, whether it's affordable or just market rate housing. And I was going to ask Jeff, he's brought it up a couple of times, and I may allude to this later in the thing, but in Asheville alone, what's the average yearly need for affordable housing? How many are not being built?
1,000
1,000 units a year. How many are being built a year? 200, maybe, 100? So when will they ever catch up? Never, right? So that's going to lead into some of the parts of this discussion about strategies, and the way we saw it was going is almost that same thing. It's incrementally moving away, but if we can attack it incrementally in other ways, hopefully we can find a way to slow it down enough. Which leads to the other point, there's plenty of work out there for people that want to work. How many developers are in this room? That's their business, developers. Oh, good. We're going to make a lot more of you, hopefully. All right, so let's keep going. Here's some more examples. Anything from a small cottage. So these all look familiar. Have you seen anybody build any of this lately? Beautiful stuff. I mean, who doesn't like this? I mean, it's, like I said, it's cute. College students on one of these slides, I think one of these is in a college town. John talks about it all the time. People basically have years trying to get into that unit, and once they're there, they never leave. You know, it's like having the best jersey on the team. I love these, the pictures of old cottage courts, because we all remember those. Who took vacations in Florida? You know, you drive along, you see this little, motor court over there. Later, they turned into real apartment complexes. Not complexes, but individual apartments. There's one in Ocean Springs that I drive by almost every day. We drive by it when we bring people through town. It's been there since the 40s, and it's always 100% occupied. But nobody really classified it, oh, that's just Dale's Cottages. Just kind of threw it off. But the bones were there. So here's the cottage that got my attention. There were about 10 other architects working on this particular part of the project, the recovery project, in which Andreas had asked them to come up with a concept to replace the potential FEMA trailer. None of us had seen a FEMA trailer, so we really were not used to it at all. But so they came up with a way of doing this and looking at it, and I sat there and go, well, wow, that's just a small house. It won't cost a whole lot of money to build it. We can actually put a carpenter team together, and I can build those in town until something else better comes along, because I don't even know when the trailers are coming. I got the idea of this. Going back to my office, I immediately began drawing these, had other people on my staff start to think about it. I drew one as, what's the size of something that I could put my family in instead of the trailer. The best day I had out of this, the unit is actually, I keep pointing to that screen because I can see it real well. The unit there, well, it worked earlier. The one on the top left was actually in Ocean Springs, and my office was manning it. We'd open it up in a day and let people see it. And a lady came over from about 4 counties over that had been flooded, and she walks up, and the best thing that she ever said, it was just so great, she said, "This is humane." And from that point on, I was there, she got me. So think of all kind of ways to treat humanity humane. So my first venture into this was Cottage Square. We felt like we needed a place where visually people could see what we were talking about. As architects, we can talk about it all day. Planners, we can talk about it all day. But getting something built out there for them to see. So this is about an 1.5 acre site. You can tell it's not regular, it's not square. It's got teeth missing, as I call it. The street is to the right side of the screen. There's railroad tracks to the left side of the screen. It's just an infill site of all infill sites. But we really weren't talking about it that way. We liked the location of it. It was next to a YMCA. It was next to a school. It was next to doctor's offices. There was a local grocer within a quarter mile. These things were there, and it had been just looked over. No one in town had seen it. I drove by it, again, every day, and just happened to have had a friend of mine ask me years before then, did I want to buy that property? I said, what property? He said, it's on Government Street. And I kept driving by it. I never did see it. And we're in the middle of picking properties for this. And I go, Fred asked me if I was interested in his property. So I called him up. I said, is it still available? He said, yeah. So I started kind of snooping around. It was perfect. That began what we get into talking about later with the incremental development is it isn't always what you think you're looking for that's going to be the best result. It's what pencils out. In this case, it was a dream. We ran with it. It wasn't a whole lot of penciling to it. We were under extreme conditions. But we started, that was the cottage that was on the trailer, now brought and put in permanent location in Cottage Square. I'm kind of like the collector of cottages there. It is a real living and working neighborhood at this point, but initially it was designed to be a showplace for these units. They range anywhere from that one that was, I'll go back to it, it's like 308 square feet. You hear tiny houses nowadays. This is the original tiny house. I don't care what anybody tells you. That's it. It was built in 2005 by some very talented and great people. And it changed the way we think about housing in a lot of ways. So that was the first block, first 4 houses that we built. Landscaping is important in any kind of neighborhood. It's not about the unit necessarily. A unit is a box. How I can make it look like it should fit right into an Asheville neighborhood, a Decatur, Georgia neighborhood, or a Birmingham neighborhood, or coastal neighborhood. It's how you detail that. But the basic housing unit, once you get that down into a place that's very livable, the rest you just keep adjusting as needed per project. Well, how did it go? Oh, and this gets into a discussion a little bit about modular. The Mississippi program was able to get federal funds to end up building 3,000 modular cottages, most of them being one-bedroom units. These are the one-bedroom units. We brought them to Cottage Square, took them off the trailers. It's this big thing, they're trailers. No, they're not. They're modular, and they're double coded, so they meet all the national codes to allow us to do this. So here they are placed permanently. And then it led to another neighborhood. This was in 2009 to 2011, 12. There was funding. This is about a 2-acre site adjacent to Cottage Square, which had been a trailer park. I never thought the trailer park would leave. It was going to be there forever. It had been there forever. We had even tried to approach the guy about selling it. He wanted a fortune for it. And so instead of just saying, turning my back to it, I started in my plan connecting. I wish I had the pointer. But Cottage Square is adjacent to it here. See this little road here? That connected right into a road off of Cottage Square, thinking ahead that someday it might go away. And someday it did. Our civil engineer for the project, who had never been a developer, and his partner, who had never been a developer, worked for the governor's office, purchased the property. We got with a local nonprofit. We went after the grants for this particular development. We were awarded the grant to build it, and we built it for affordable housing. Our units, the smaller units, were renting at the point about $500 a month. The larger units, which were 3-bedroom, over 1,200 square feet, were renting in the range of $1,200 a month. So we were meeting like the 80% AMI, and people just flooded in. This development and my development basically have no vacancies. As soon as one goes off moves out, we clean it up, fix it up. There's usually someone waiting to move in. So make them cute. People like them. Build them right. These are built just like there's not a material on the exterior of this project that's not like houses I was building on the Florida Gulf Coast that were, selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Built it. The builders were charging $200 a square foot or more to build them, and we figured out how to build them for under $100 a square foot. It's amazing when you kind of finally get your systems right. Okay, so that's kind of what has been built for you to see as examples. What are we doing now? About 2 years ago, it was one of these trips Ben had me up here working on. that I was invited to stop in Decatur, Georgia on my way home. And I met with this is how things are just so strange. Usually when I walk into a city or talking to a group of public officials, it was like, okay, can I get a density of this? No. What's it zoned? Oh, well, you'd have to get a zoning change for that. I need to build it under 1,200 square feet. No, our ordinances only allow it to be over 1,200 square feet. That's the conversation. Going into this boardroom with the city Downtown Development Authority leader and a couple of other city officials, I would start answering those same questions. I go, yes, you can do that. Yes, that's fine. Yes, you don't have to go to before any zoning. And I was like, I sat down after I was making my notes and said, what do you want me to do? He said, we'd like you to come in and help us develop a cottage court, because we're not getting anyone, now that we've passed our ordinance 2 years ago, no one's building it. We can't get developers to see this and come in and say, yeah, we'd love to do this instead of the $1 million house that they're building. If they built 4 or 5 of these, our densities could go up and we could get affordable housing. They're really not getting it. The city has bought this piece of property, can you help us do it? I just kind of laughed first to kind of take the tension out of the room. I said, of course I'll do it. Where's this ever happened? I haven't seen it ever. So a little bit of that is like the brain damage. I'm in my 60s. My partner, one has just turned 60. We've been at this for a long time. He's been specializing in his group, David and John, in the fourplexes and getting the models right for that. I've been doing the cottages, but we were always running against code issues. And so immediately we started going, okay, we're going after the ones that get it. There's not enough time in us to just keep fighting that battle. We can train people to fight the battles if they want, but we're going to find the ones that are already supportive. And what's happened, though, is they've been finding us. And it's really, in the last 2 years, the whole thing's exploded. And again, why I'm in this room. So you can see the various zonings around this. This one the city did have to go in and get a zoning change, but the city did it. I didn't have to do it. Within they started a land trust, and the land trust and the city Downtown Development Authority took it through the process of the rezoning. They took it through the process of approval for the historic neighborhood. All that was done by them. It was a great partnership. I didn't have to stand up in any meeting and being an outsider and defend a project that they actually wanted. So this project now ended up, and we had a charrette. Does everybody know a workshop where we invited the neighboring areas to participate? And in a 2-day time, we ended up coming up that this odd-shaped site, notice odd-shaped site, infill is not about squares and rectangles, typically. It's going to be something left over. So we ended up with 6 units. Currently, this project is out for bids. We have various sizes. The largest one's just over 1,000 square feet. And, this one's a 2-bedroom with a loft, and it's 969 square feet, but very efficient. In fact, the guy that does all my drafting for me is my right arm. He says, "This is it. You can't squeeze any more into one of these. This is about all you can ever do. Stop." And there's another version. That's the larger one, which is 1,100 square feet. So we're out to bids. Hopefully, they were supposed to bid on Tuesday, but by the end of the month of October, we'll have our bids, and we'll be under construction probably by the end of the year, first of the year. So this is actually a drivable distance for people here to go see one. And it's a very open book process. It's a public entity that will own it. I heard people talk about, policemen, firemen, stuff. What the city has decided to do, because this is a prototypical deal, is it's being opened up to only city employees, because in Decatur, Julie knows, it's very difficult to stay in Decatur these days for anybody that's trying to get a house under $300,000. So they're having to go outside the city to live and work in Decatur. These will be marketed and sold in the range of 225. This is affordable in Decatur. This is what blows me away. Between $225,000 and $250,000 for these units. All right, Thomasville, Georgia. Anybody heard of Thomasville? It's a great place, isn't it? I'd been there. I worked in Tallahassee for several years after Katrina, driving back and forth, and had driven through Thomasville, but it never stopped. And I was at a conference a year and a half ago now. I was stopped by the city planner and his assistant and asked to visit Thomasville. I said, why? Well, you just come by, you'll see. So about a month after getting back, I called him, made an appointment, and went over there. And so for a day and a half, I was toured around Thomasville. What they had done, this is a city, again, went out on this huge limb. They created a land bank. They had a local nonprofit that partnered with the land bank, and they bought the missing houses, the property that everyone had abandoned, weren't paying taxes on, in a transitional part of the city. And it was just perfect for infill because it has school next door. There's a factory just up from it, and then town center's like 3 blocks away. But they didn't just do that. They put an overlay code over a whole neighborhood, the Victoria Park Code, which you can see to the right. It's a form-based code. Then they went back and they redivided this block that had been just basically a few houses in there, but a larger piece of property just kind of tucked in the middle. And they did it with new urban principles of smaller lots, fronting streets, rear alleys. They actually created a center street that didn't exist in the beginning, Brighton Street. And they tried to get people to start. They just thought people would be running at them to develop this, but it was just strange. It wasn't what people were used to seeing in Thomasville. They were used to the suburbs. The builders in Thomasville always went and were building new homes in the suburbs. Or, again, those that know Thomasville, they worked for the plantations, and they built extremely expensive things out on these plantations that totally surround this community. So you had these two extremes, but nobody was looking at the middle, where real people live and work and want to live there. And what they were finding was people were moving back from Atlanta after they got married, have a child, and go, I'm going home to Thomasville, I'm getting out of here, I'd like to live there. They get there, they find a house, they pay $100,000 for it in a neighborhood they want to live in the central downtown area, but it takes them another $100,000, $150,000 to renovate it, bring it up to code, and bring it up to the historic standards and all that stuff, and now they've got $250,000 invested. Where once we were convinced to do this, again, let me go to the next slide. They walked me around, and they had actually put in parks. They had built all the sidewalks. All the sewer and water was brand new. The lots were platted. There was nothing to do except go vertical. The last time I'd seen that in any way, shape, or form was on the Florida Gulf Coast on 30A, where very rich developers come in and did that and got us architects to come over and say, build the vertical. So here I've been working forever trying to do affordable housing to a higher standard, and now I'm going, build vertical. Oh, and we want you to do market rate housing for here, because we've already done the affordable. I forgot that slide, been a good one to have in here, the habitat houses. They'd already done habitat houses. They have a CHIPS grant. I forget what CHIPS stands for, but it's a funding where they went in and renovated the existing houses in the neighborhood. So they felt like they'd met their affordability. They wanted it to be a truly mixed neighborhood, but no one in the town, no one in the general region got it. They didn't see how you could really build in this neighborhood. So we've started very simple plans. Again, these are derivatives of what we began doing on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, just have been moving along with other options and development. And we've got 2 houses started there now. These are 725 square feet. and 2-bedroom, 1 bath, living, dining, kitchen, everything that goes with it, and a large porch on the front and a large porch on the side when they're finished. Hardy siding, metal roofs, wood floors on the interior when we're done. And we're actually, which I don't like to do, but we're starting to gamble right now in that when we went to bid out in that area, all of our numbers were coming up, pushing us even higher than what we thought the market rate would be. So we worked with our contractor finally and said, okay, we'll do a cost plus with you, open book, but we need to see where the numbers are coming. We're going to guarantee your profit and overhead. You don't have anything to worry about. Let's just build these. And so we're in the middle of that process now. Due to various factors, the affordability, they're doing a comprehensive plan right now that I worked on last week, and out of that, just like this, your city, the word affordable just kept coming up over and over again. How can we get our affordability back into this neighborhood? And so we're willing to work with them. We've offered them just in some, we were already starting to think this way, but this brought it to fruition first, was like, okay, what if we don't have to buy the property from you guys? You're the land bank. Let's take this and make it a soft second. When the new owner buys it, they simultaneously close on the property and the building. You give them a soft second based on the value once the house is on there. So it's not even what you're trying to sell us for. Now it's got a house on it. It's increased value. We're working with a local bank now that they can qualify for like 3.5% loans. And if we did it right, if all the numbers work out, they would be able to hit their deductible with just that soft second and not have to come out of pocket. So, but the land bank had never heard of it, of anything like that. So you're basically educating as you move along and trying to create affordability as we move into projects. There's some other ways we're throwing out there to do it, but that's one of them. You've always got to be thinking and working ahead like that in this business. And sometimes you're wrong, but a lot of times you're free thinking and everybody goes, oh yeah, a banker will go, oh yeah, I can do that. I've never done it before, but I know it's allowed, right? I've never been approached about it. So, and then now here's another one in Decatur, Georgia. What I said earlier, the city hired us to try to get developers, existing developers or builders, to come on board. We haven't even broken ground yet. And we've been hired for 2 projects from private landowners that have gotten it. And they want to become developers of their own projects. And we're starting with preliminary designs right now for those projects in Decatur. And hopefully they'll be almost parallel at some point with the public process, but through them start to give more examples of what's possible. Led over to Memphis, Tennessee. Again, a place that years ago I probably wouldn't have ever stepped foot in, but it's changed. I'd gone there a couple of times and was like, do I have to go to Memphis again? It had gone down so far, but it's come back in the last 10 years. A lot of things going on. There's a consortium of the local hospitals between Methodist Le Bonheur, the St. Jude's, and I think Baptist Hospital, and there's also the University of Tennessee School of Medicine. And there's a neighborhood that exists between all these entities that has basically the leftover. They did a TIF project in an adjacent neighborhood and have brought it back to where there's few lots left to be developed. This happens to be one of them. But in the other one, which got us there are hundreds of homes that need to be either torn down, fixed up, new ones brought in to regenerate this neighborhood, because their workforce drives 2 hours to get to work at the hospitals. The hospitals have done the typical things that corporations do. They bought up the property around them, putting it like in a bank for themselves, thought they would build more parking lots someday, but they've resided themselves. They're going through like a $3 billion growth in that area with the hospitals in the next few years, that if they don't get their housing back in order there, they'll never get the people to come work on their expansions. So this is one thing driving another. It'll create new housing for workers, but it'll also fix up the housing for the existing people that live in those neighborhoods. So they've expanded the TIF district now to encompass this neighborhood, and we'll be able to master plan this, master develop it, and that just means that we're hoping to create a lot of small developers to come in and work in this kind of neighborhood and be able to build the houses where, again, what happens is the larger developer that's brought back Memphis, he just does big multifamilies. That's his stuff. He does not get doing a cottage court. It's just not, he doesn't see it. Supports it, but it's not for him. So our job will be to hopefully find and train the developers that could come in and do this, and that's our goal. But anyway, this one is another example of a small lot. We're going to end up having a multi-use building, live, work, 2 cottages, and a 2-story cottage on a small site. This is allowed in their code. So we're not battling the codes here. Those are in the very initial stages of things. So I've already touched on a lot of this.
What was the size of that lot you just
He asked me that last night, and I was like, I forgot. It's probably about 60 by 200. Traditionally, one house would be on it. Traditionally, and the neighborhood is that. But it has, what's cool about it, it has, for what we do, remember I was talking about the lanes and the alleys? It's a corner lot, and this, I'm pointing at the screen. Sorry. Corner. This is already a platted alley. They got it right back 120 years ago. And this neighborhood is just full of those kind of lots. So, any other quick questions? Yes?
Do all of these developments come with CCRs? Are they restricted in that first form?
We do. The majority of our neighborhoods are rentals. We started seeing that trend in 2008 when people that had lost their houses after Katrina were not getting insurance money. They couldn't afford, because they had a mortgage still on a house, they couldn't rebuild their house. They had to find alternatives to live, and the need for rentals was just going through the roof, prior to the recession. So that's the way we built our model. It's what works best for us. For those others that are for sale, they're generally going to be a condo with probably just the divided to where, what's under your footprint you own. That everything else is a condo association, which it's kind of hairy. We're finding people, especially out in Seattle, they're doing a lot of cottage courts and this kind of stuff in the Seattle area. And the legalities and trying to get through that is being researched. There's some good people working on it right now. I tend to go, you need to go hire that group to figure that out. I'm going to go on and build another one. Whether all these came with community neighborhood associations or anything like that. And ours really don't. I'm the association in mine. The association? Potentially. It just depends on how it's set up. Does it drive up the cost?
Yeah, there's a monthly HOA fee.
Yeah.
If that's the way it's working.
All right. So there's not enough developers out there. So what we, again, running your head up against the wall so many times with the traditional developers, and I know there's some in the room, and we still are here to turn you to this idea. There's a lot of work to be done in this area, of obvious by the questions and things I've heard today here too. It's a different way of thinking. It's not your typical model. So what we found was there's a whole group of people out there that needed to be trained, coached, connected, and we were starting to run across them. And so instead of just saying, oh yeah, that's cool and stuff, let's give them an avenue. So John came with this idea that we would create this nonprofit to go out there and actually teach people how to be a developer. Of those that are developers, how many went to school to get your developer's license? None? I didn't think so. It was the easiest thing I ever did. I just went and got my card printed, and I'm now a developer. So you're really not taught it. You end up doing it through the school of hard knocks. You know, the banker's waiting for you to bring in your Proforma, and you come up with some scribbly stuff on a piece of paper that he can't give to his board. But after you've done that a few times, you figure out what he's really asking you for, and you get good at it, and now you're a developer that's really acting like a developer. So, but there's no way to do that. So we came up with these workshops, boot camps that have been done across the country in the last 2 years. Our annual average attendance is probably 70 to 75 in our initial one, and then the 2-day workshop about 30 or 40. John, I think we had 50 at the last one. John's like, too many, because it's really a lot of hands-on work. So I'm here to just kind of introduce you into that concept. In November 15th, there will be a workshop in Decatur, Georgia, the city I was telling you about. The city's actually sponsoring that. And then sometime next year, I'm not sure of the date, there will be one here in Asheville. So put that on your calendars. Incrementaldevelopment.com. Incrementaldevelopmentalliance.com. Yeah. It's all the words spelled out. And connecting it, I didn't hit that. You know, we were talking about that earlier today, or in the group that was talking. You know, these community groups that are out there, you know, looking for these ways to accomplish things. If you start bringing them together, you start the same conversation, then they can be your advocates when you are having trouble with changing a zoning or other things, if they're convinced that this is what's needed. Potential small developers. We found that they come from all types and businesses. We're looking for those. We're looking for potential investment partners. These don't have to be banks. These can be private monies that are reinvested. And then we're looking for just those neighborhood champions that are out there being advocates for what we're doing. And I was saying they come from everything: realtors, property managers, lawyers. We've had doctors. They've come to our seminars, but they want us to be the developers for them. They have the property, and they understand it, and they want it that kind of. And they've done the same thing as the hospitals did. They bought up the properties around the hospitals because they knew someday something would happen, and now something's potentially happened. They want to be part of it. Contractor, you know, anyone in the building trades is a perfect, you know, I can build it for that developer. Why can't I do it myself? And what we're finding about is architects, landscape architects, planners, you know, they've seen their work go towards making a developer a lot of money, and they're like, well, you know, what if I could do that myself? So I think I've touched on most of this. Just kind of went into more detail of what I was saying earlier. What do you build? You know, we've been talking about cottage courts. No matter what it is, keep it simple. You know, don't go try to build this architectural monument to affordable housing. You won't make it. I've told you we've made it with doing simple cubes, boxes, but it's the materials we put in it that we really worry about. It's not a lot of other ornamentation that we're trying to achieve. How do you begin? You can buy an existing building, renovate it. If it's already got tenants, you just take over the management, learn how to run. Like I said, in our side of things, rental is where we see the most traction. And this is a house. There are FHA loans that will call this a house. We'll get into that in the workshops. I'm not going to go into the details of that today, but you know, a building like that can qualify as a house if it's designed properly and meets the criteria. You know, we're talking about the fourplexes, duplexes, and stuff like that. There's also, you know, ways of doing that under existing lenders. Follow the financing. You know, build your simple building, get your idea of what it is, do a Proforma. Does anybody, I'm using that word, I know it's foreign to a lot of people. It's basically your analysis of how to make, if you make money or not. And you have to take in your hard costs, which are like architects, building, I'm sorry, we're soft costs. That's right, we're softer. Apologize. You know, your hard costs are your building materials, you know, buying your site, doing that stuff. Soft costs are, you know, your interest rates, your architects, realtors, that kind of stuff, management fees. And you boil that all down, and there's usually a percentage range at the end. If you're making that a certain percentage, you make the banker happy, you're happy, your investors, potential investors are happy, and you move forward with it, and you find people to live there. And again, you can look at each property differently, whether you want to do a cottage court with 4 cottages or you want to do a 4-plex. And again, seeing how the different dollars work for each of those will help you make your decision. You may just want to do a cottage court because you want to live in one and manage it, but you don't want to be next to that neighbor right on your wall. Or you might be happy that you make more money by doing the 4-plex where you're not spending as much money building all those exterior walls. Another example of Proforma. They don't have to be so pretty. They can be kind of roughed out as long as you fill in most of the blanks. But the blanks are this. They're going to see an overview that you really know what you're talking about. You know, that you've done a plan. It makes sense. It's in a neighborhood that you've researched and done some things about. You're more educated about it than anybody else walking in the room. And that you've got your plans and elevations done, whether you get an architect to do it or it's something you've gotten out of a plan book done and that you can reuse it. And then you do your Proforma and you take that package to your banker and hopefully, you know, y'all work it out. Again, a lot of this will be covered in detail in those workshops. I just want to introduce you to the concept of what we're getting out there. And now we've actually, in this time, had projects actually being built. These are some pretty faces. I've already met people here. Oh, how many in here that are still here have been to one of our workshops? There's 1, 2. There's an alumni back there that comes to a lot of them. So anyway, see if you can find it. They're not very expensive and they're real quick and you meet a lot of great people and some soulmates while you're doing it because you find out like, I'm not crazy for thinking this way all this time. I can really do this. But here's a project in Fayetteville by Allie, single family, on a corner lot with, you know, very narrow, alley in the rear. Not that her name's Allie, but it's not. Jay's done doing a I think that's a 4-plex, 6-plex in Chattanooga. He's a little bit further along than some at this point. And this Ryan Terry, he attended our first one right outside of Dallas in a little town called, not Midlothian, anyway, one of those towns south of Dallas. And he and his father's an architect. He's just out of the Marines. He's a real go-getter, no BS with Ryan. And after attending the seminar, they changed their whole model that they were going for and began building a smaller scale unit. They were going to build up on the front of the street where they would put their highest dollar stuff up first. They were convinced after the seminar to go back and build on the back side of the block with smaller units, more typical construction than brick and masonry type that they were going to put on the front. And so they're out of the ground. He's actually become one of our speakers on the circuit because of his experience. Lessons learned. There's been a lot, and the most, what I would say is that out of my time doing this, I've just found that what works for me, the lesson I've learned over looking back is that you have to be persistent and you have to be patient. It doesn't all happen at once. It's not going to be what everybody else is doing. You know, the kids will throw things at you. No. I never was one that followed the rules much. And, but always, don't compromise on your goals or your, a lot of people talked about, developers that get it. You can be that person. And what we're telling you, you don't have to wait for that guy to ride in on their white horse. They're all amongst your neighbors in your community. They're in this room. So, look amongst yourselves, get your passions up, put those groups together. And I think, there's enough energy here. Like I said, I've been to Asheville several times. You've got the codes in place. If you don't have them in place, the city's friendly about working towards getting the codes in place. I hear they're also friendly, from what I heard today, about aiding in grants and monies to bring on affordable housing. Obviously, the bankers understand it. They talk really well about programs that are out there and available. I think I just checked off all the boxes. So what are you waiting on? So there you go. Thank you.
So the city of Asheville, as you may know, is poised to put in place some new zoning regulations that make it possible for us to build smaller units and multiple units on smaller lots. So we're very happy. Most of us are very happy about that. My question is there anything else we need to do to make sure that objective is achieved? So what we're trying to do is both increase supply of smaller units, but how do we also make sure that we don't get, a triplex that where each one is $400,000? I mean, is there anything else we need to do? I'm not a huge truster of the market on this sort of thing in Asheville right now, so is there anything else we need to do?
Well, when you talk about going to market rate, and at some point, if you're building affordable and you're trying to stay away from the market rate, it was brought up earlier. You put some sort of regulations on the property if it's a developer that's done it. If he's still managing it, it keeps them in line for several years. If it's someone buying the property, they may, before they can take full market value out of it, they may have to live in the house for 15 years, or the duplex, even if it's divided that way. But I looked at worked here enough to know the cottage court code, and what I've run into in most places, and if you're just doing adjustments for single family lots now, which to me is kind of like a cottage code, it's in the same vein. You're putting more units than the single. If you're really trying to get the density up, don't limit the number. What works in today's economy is not what worked 50 years ago in the economy. I've been arguing with the planner in Thomasville. They put 9 units per cottage court. Well, what if I have 2 acres of land? I can only put 9 units there. What will happen is the regulations, which you already have with setbacks, height limits, vegetation, requirements, space that's left, footprints that need to be left over, that'll determine the number of units. And then the other thing the developer can do, and somebody said this earlier, maybe the size of the units, like we're dealing with, the size have to change. Maybe it's, even though the dollar a square foot stays up there, but this is the size that you can live in. And that starts to really determine how many units that developer can make work. And if his numbers have the percentage at the end, that's what he can do. If you limit the number and he never can make those numbers work, he's never going to do it. Just never happens. So that's my main thing I pick out of almost every code. Do they have a number that they're putting on how many you can put on each of these? Start there. There's probably other things. He's asking how much the IncDev costs. It actually depends on the location and how many sponsors we can get in that location. But I would say it ranges probably between $200 and $400 for a weekend session. And sometimes there's food included in that. Per person, per person. But again, sponsorships, there's usually scholarships. Almost in every community we work in, there's scholarships available for those that apply for them. And all got to do is say, I need one, and usually they're available. Okay. It's been great, y'all. Thank you so much.